30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
Hi,
My name's JC McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. All About You is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing live every single week at AccessTV.org studio. All About You is a show that's designed to let you, the viewers, know some interesting things, some things about the particular guest. And this morning on All About You, we have a guest who has a tremendous life, who's been through a navigating course of her life that has made some tremendous strides, and she's definitely willing to give back to her community. The guest this morning has many different titles as an author, coach, motivational speaker, professional title, principal consultant of CHBM Services, also executive director, founder of Disruptive Inc. LLC, no other than Catherine McNeil. Good morning, Catherine. How are you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
It's our pleasure. Catherine, do you want to clarify anything about your title? Did I say it correctly, or do you want to start towards your bio? I just want to make sure everything is set.
You're awesomely good to go. It'll all come out. I wear a lot of different hats. They all foundationally are rooted in career and workforce development. So we'll get into it.
Okay. Catherine, I believe you were born and raised in Chicago.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, South Side.
South Side, all right. What was it like growing up in Chicago as a child, as a little kid growing up in the early stages?
So the funny story is my experience is a little bit eclectic. Um, I am I am an individual that had the opportunity to live across all sides of the city, with the exception to the west side. I didn't reside on the west side, but I spent a lot of time there. So I was born in literally Roseland Hospital. So Roseland is one of the far south Chicago areas,
Mm.
rather. Lived over there in that area till I was about 9 years old. Attended private school in that area, the no longer existing Roseland Christian School. It was a staple in that community. And then everything else started to begin. I transitioned to the south suburbs. I transitioned to the northwest side. I transitioned to the far north side. Then I transitioned back south, and southeast was kind of where I landed until adulthood.
Did you like moving different places throughout your course of your childhood?
So, in transparency, no one has ever asked me that question, and when I kind of think of it, it's a bit of a twofold, right? The situation was outside of my control,
Mm-hmm.
and it was ultimately normal to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
We moved probably every 2 years, give or take. We didn't spend longer than 2 years in any place until we moved like on 81st and Coles. When we moved on 81st and Coles, that that was a staple for my mom up until I moved out in my early 20s. But it was different. Hindsight, when I think about how I am as an adult and my ability to be able to adapt to new environments easily and just kind of pick up where I left off, I believe is attributed to that.
Mm-hmm.
And having had to move like that and go to different schools and have new experiences, but it's not something that I wanted for my children.
Well, Catherine, when you say moving in Chicago, are we talking like moving a few blocks, or moving miles away? Because just to kind of clarify this moving pattern that you had.
So there was a huge shift. So as I mentioned, right, I lived in the Roseland area until I was about 9.
Hmm.
We then moved to Calumet City, which is a southern suburb. There was no, there was no way for me to travel back and forth. So when I transitioned from the Roseland area and moved to the Calumet City Dalton area, I started a new school. When we moved from the Calumet City Dalton area, we moved all the way to the northwest side to the Wicker Park area.
Hmm.
I started a new school. When I graduated, as a matter of fact, I had moved before I graduated from eighth grade. When we moved from the northwest side to the far north side, I commuted so that I can finish at the school that I attended in Wicker Park. So by that time, there started to be some mellowing out there. When I graduated from eighth grade, um, I then of course went to high school. I got into the high school that I wanted to go to, which was not in the same neighborhood, but it was on the north side as well. It was far north, but far northwest. When I transferred high schools, that was by choice. And I didn't move. I
Hmm.
commuted. I commuted from the far north side all the way to back to the Roseland Pullman area for my junior year of high school. So I was traveling CTA for a little over an hour a day so that I could go to the high school that I wanted to go to at that time. And then we moved back south. We
Oh,
moved back south. That school closed, and I had to transfer again. And I finished my senior year at another Catholic high school, and that was kind of how it rounded out. So yes, there were some shifts that had to happen, and in other situations, I was able to do a both and stay at the school, and then I just commuted on CTA,
well,
public transportation.
mhm. Sounds like Catherine, you can adapt to any situation because if you're moving different places, and Chicago's a big city, and you could do this at a young age and fit right in. Maybe children can adapt easier than adults. Maybe it's not the case. But I think something definitely developed towards yourself by being able, I guess in life, anything that happens or everything that happens kind of shapes you to who you are today towards what you've been through, let's say in the past. And as we're getting to the stage of graduating high school, I believe you was going to Penn State University. First of all, where was the decision to decide to choose Penn State as the university that you was looking to go, or that you did actually enroll in?
So my life at that time was scripted and outlined to look a little different than it does now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur was not even on my radar. Giving back to the community, not on my radar. None of these things. When I started to look towards what I wanted to be when I grew up and what I wanted the rest of my life to look like, I've always been an individual that liked to solve problems and wanted to understand why. And computer engineering kind of seemed like a field that would have worked out for me. I knew I wanted to be successful. I knew I wanted to be great. I knew I wanted to have an impact. And it just kind of made sense. So, looking into institutions that had great programs and opportunities, I only applied because at that time it was a lot different than it is now, right? With the Common App, you can apply to like 100 schools at one time. At that time, you were literally paying an application fee for every school you applied to, so you needed to apply thoughtfully and seriously. And I know Florida A&M was an option. Michigan State University was an option. Penn State was an option, and there was one other school, and I don't remember right now. And I know I went to visit Penn State, and that ended up being the choice that I made, and then I ultimately got accepted too.
Catherine, you never thought about staying home and going to DePaul University? Just curiosity just to ask that question.
So the funny thing is, my middle daughter attends DePaul.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
funny that you asked that. Well,
Hmm.
she's on a gap year now, but she attends DePaul. However, no,
No, I never thought
never
about
crossed
that.
my mind. I wanted to go as far away from home as I possibly could.
Right. The only thing I'll say about the Paul, I used to like that college basketball team before I switched to Duke. Believe it or not, I was like probably elementary school up into junior high school. DePaul University. I believe Mark Aguirre, basketball player. You might be too young to remember him.
I don't know.
But I just thought about DePaul when I used to like that basketball team in Chicago and everything. So now you're in Penn State. What is it like? I guess this is the first time you had lived in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken.
So, yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
it was not the first time that I lived out of state because there was a brief stint around the time when I was 5 or 6. My mom had moved us to Ohio.
Okay.
We we had moved to Ohio for a little while, and then we came back to rejoin my grandmother in Roseland. But of course, at 5 or 6, I don't necessarily remember that. However, that was my first stint being that far away from home. Of course, being on my own, and the campus that I attended was near Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a different type of big city, a different type of environment, and it was a time.
Mm-hmm. So you liked it? I mean, how did you feel? I mean, I know it's different from what it just sounds like, but was there anything that kind of turned you off that made you have doubts, or you just was able to stay focused and move forward towards Penn State University?
To be perfectly honest, it was just like everything else,
Mm-hmm.
right? I moved, I was in a different environment. The objective was to be successful. So, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough to garner a great group of friends that I'm still connected to now, even though everybody went their separate ways freshman, sophomore year. Um, and as much as I realistically knew how, I made the best of it, and it was a good time. I will go on record to say I was thriving in that environment. I was an honor student yet again. Um, Going into sophomore year, I ended up. I was supposed to be president of student government for
Mm-hmm.
that campus, so I think I was doing pretty well.
Okay. Now, up until your sophomore year, like you just mentioned, everything is going smoothly. You're moving forward, and then all of a sudden, you decided that you had to drop out of Penn State. Could you kind of elaborate on this decision?
Sure. So after my freshman year, I came back home for the summer, right?
Mm-hmm.
As normal students, like that's just what we do, right? I came back home for the summer, and I had a boyfriend prior to my leaving for college.
Mm-hmm.
So that relationship kind of continued over the summer, and I got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And once we found out that I was pregnant, the conversation, took place with my family. And my father said, um, he said, you have an option. He was like, I'm not sending you back to school pregnant. I'm not sending you 800 miles pregnant. So you want to continue your education? I will continue to pay for it, and you can return to school. But if you want to have this kid, you're on your own. And 25 years later, because my oldest is 25, we know what the decision was.
Okay. Now, how did that make you feel, though? I mean, your father, like you mentioned, like you just mentioned, he's paying for your education. You seem like you're having a good time at Penn State, and it sounds like, in all indications, that you wanted to go back to Penn State, and then he decides that he wants to cut off the financial sources. And did you have to now make? I guess not think you had to make a big adjustment, but how did this affect the relationship that you had with your father by him giving you that type of ultimatum that you have to either have the baby and don't go back to college in Penn State?
So there were a lot of feelings. At that time, my father's decision made sense. In hindsight, my father's decision made sense,
Mm-hmm.
and so did mine. So my dad became a parent at 19.
Mm-hmm.
I had an older brother that passed some years ago. He was about 7 years older than me. So my dad went through the, being a parent, trying to get an education at the same time, and so on and so forth. So from his vantage point, he was protecting me, and it made sense.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of that, though, is there were some other things that had taken place a few years prior to my getting ready to graduate, where me and my dad had a very different relationship. Around my sixth grade year, my father ended up going to prison, and he was locked up for maybe about 3 years. He only ended up doing about half of his sentence. And when he returned back to society, he came back in a way where it was like he wanted to pick up where we left off. And there was so much that had happened between then and by then I'm entering high school, right? There was a gap, and there were issues. So our relationship had been strained for quite some time, and up until that point, from my standpoint, it was more so of a financial relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward to this ultimatum, it made sense,
Right.
right? He pulled the purse strings. That was the reality. Fine. I was in a very rebellious place for the most part, to say the least. So I oversimplified how simple it would be to be able to move forward and to figure this out on my own. But it's what I did.
Okay, now, Catherine, you're coming back, I would assume, to Chicago, and you having to make some decisions. I mean, I guess you will be classified, and I just say this bluntly, you had to drop out. Did you have a plan to get back into a university, higher education? I don't know the whole ins and outs when you drop out, how simple it would be just to go to another college, but you kind of lay out, excuse me, you kind of lay down the platform towards your next move that you made with your life.
Okay.
Hmm.
So it's not that simple, right? When you're coming back, especially from a school as prestigious as Penn State, right? That was a Big Ten D1 school.
Hmm.
So of course, if I want to continue my education, it just makes sense that I stay at an institution that is on par with that one,
Hmm.
right? And here in Illinois, inside of the Chicago city limits, that would have been UIC. So
Hmm.
University of Illinois at Chicago campus,
Hmm.
right? So because this was like the August time frame, we're supposed to be starting. I could not just transition. So that fall semester, I was out of school. I wasn't in a place because I didn't know funding and things along those lines. I couldn't afford to pay for school. So in the moment, UIC was a pipe dream.
Hmm.
I also didn't want to lose momentum, so I went to one of the city colleges. I attended Daly College in Chicago for one semester, um, and it just didn't work for me. One, again, I underestimated and oversimplified what being pregnant and trying to go to school would look like.
Hmm.
And I had a very hard time. So I did not do well that spring semester. It wasn't an environment I wanted to be in. And my daughter was due in April. So I wasn't going to be able to finish the semester regardless. So I ultimately lost an entire school year.
Hmm.
That next fall, though, was a bit of a different story. And I went through a very creative process of getting back to where I needed to be. I actually I didn't enroll in UIC until that would have been 2001, I believe, because while I was at UIC, I became pregnant with my second daughter. So it was around that 2001 fallish range that I ended up getting back in school for real.
Okay. I don't know if this is a fair question, but as a woman, you can answer it. If you have to get pregnant in college, do you think it would have been easier or harder had it been if you were still in high school, or it really wouldn't make a difference in your particular case?
So I think that had it been in high school, it would have ended up being more of my parents' responsibility.
Hmm.
But because I was at that 19 transitioning into 20-year old and I was technically air quote an adult,
Hmm.
um, it was easier for me to work. It was easier for me to figure out what that next move would be. And it was easier for me to do what I wanted to do in regards to that. In high school, I would have still been under my parents' roof and their thumb and their governance. I still lived with my mother at that time, but it was a very different dynamic because, like I said, like I was working, so I was, there was an income being generated. Whether or not I wanted to finish college was up to me at that point, and the expectation, in all transparency, was that I was going to become a statistic and I wasn't going to finish.
Hmm. And that's the bad thing when you hear that statistic. And that's why I said about dropping out of, well, I'm saying it, if you're in high school, you hear the statistics that most teenage moms, 50% maybe or close to that, ends up dropping out of high school. And if you really want to get stereotypical and negative, and I don't want to put this on your life, next thing you know,
You're fine.
okay, next thing you know comes welfare and other things. The father, they don't get married. So when you just said statistic, that could be a real bold statement when you say that. It might not just be limited just to one particular area of a person's life when you say that statistic. But you seem like you have a very strong determination. You did indicate that you went to City College and you kind of is trying to get to the next level as an adult, raising, I believe you mentioned you had your second child shortly after the first child.
So I had a good time.
Hmm.
It's all sarcasm. When
Hmm.
I am being as sarcastic as I possibly can be,
Okay.
right? Because my road was eclectic and it also mirrored how I grew up.
Uh-huh.
And I say that by between the time of 1999 when I got pregnant with my oldest daughter
Hmm.
up until the time I finished um, my bachelor's degree in 2007.
Hmm.
I had several jobs. I had worked in several industries. I had gone to and attended several different programs at several different colleges and or universities. There was a lot of change and there was a lot of transition. And I mean a lot because the reality was okay, engineering is not something that I'm going to be able to pursue anymore. I just don't have time. I have these little people to take care of.
Hmm.
So, no dreams. I can't do dreams, right? I need to figure out how to get this degree. I need to get a degree in a field that I can be able to apply anywhere. And I need to make it happen. And I need to make it happen quickly. So, there was a lot of transitioning in that aspect. Then I also needed to be a part of a program that would be able to wrap around the fact that I needed to work full time because I need to take care of these children because
Hmm.
I'm doing this by myself.
Right.
Right. So there was a lot that was happening. And in that time frame from 1999 to 2007, there was a lot that did happen.
Mm.
So I probably attended about four different colleges. I switched jobs five or six times, um, even to a point where I was working for Chicago Transit Authority. And because I'm a Gen Xer, I'm a part of the generation where when you get into the railroads, you get into a utility, you get into transportation, these are the jobs that you stay at and you retire from because they're considered good jobs. And they are good jobs. However, what I didn't know then that I know now is purpose and passion outweigh all the rest of that. If you're not working in, if you're not spending time in, if you're not producing in a place where you are being fulfilled and you feel like you're a value add, it's wasted momentum, it's wasted time, it's wasted years. And all of this awareness was happening during all of this transition. So when I finally graduated from Robert Morris, which is now a part of Roosevelt University, um, I had decided to continue on to my master's. That was not a part of the conversation ever either, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was in my transition in in my master's program that I got into the industrial organizational psychology field, and I became an IO psychologist, and all of the self-awareness and the development that happens during that program was what turned my life upside down
Okay.
and shifted everything.
Mm-hmm. Everything. Okay, so now at this point, you're in Chicago. You seem like you're getting your life more stable towards where you're living at, and you're in a different. I guess you are in your career development stages. Is there any other challenges that you're looking? You just mentioned you completed your master's degree. That's a real high honor. So did you get to this point feeling like you've, I guess, accomplished what you needed to accomplish? You just want to stay focused on your career, or how did you all of a sudden get this passion or this desire to want to give back in other areas beyond just taking care of yourself and your family?
There was a little bit more to that development process that was taking place up
Mm-hmm.
until the time of me completing my master's.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about the school piece, right, and the transition in schools and the changing majors, and we talked about the different jobs. I moved out of my mom's house when I was about 23,
Mm-hmm.
and because everything made sense to me in theory from what I saw, right, I was supposed to buy property. I wasn't supposed to rent, right? Because I'm focused on breaking generational curses and I'm trying to do things the right way. And I refuse to be a statistic. I'm not going to be on any type of welfare. And I also was not, I made too much for any type of support and didn't make enough to be able to live. That's a whole different show and conversation. But all of these things were happening. So I bought a condo. So I moved back to the Calumet City Dalton area. Um, I bought a condo with my two little girls, and about 2.5 years into that, I ended up in foreclosure. I had lost my job. I had placed my girls. My girls were attending Roseland Christian, the school that I had started out at.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't afford to pay tuition. My car was repossessed, and I went through chapter 7 and the whole starting over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved back to Chicago, back to the east side. And for the 2 years that I was going through my master's program, I lived off my student loans.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to work for full time. I wanted to focus on the program because, to your point, this was a critical discovery phase because at this point, yeah, I graduated with my bachelor's in business administration with a focal with the focus point on business management. Yay! So I did that, right? And I really only did that because no one expected me to be able to do it because I had had those kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a bachelor's degree in business is one of those degrees that you can take and you can do something with it anywhere. So I had accomplished that and I was excited about that. But I still wasn't making the money that I needed to be making. I still wasn't in a place of affordability and I didn't qualify for any type of help.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, when my lease was up in the apartment that I was in, I moved back home with my mom, who had moved back to Roseland at this time. And my mom was like, "You can stay here and you can figure it out." So I went through the whole process. I graduated with my master's. I did all of that. And because of the fact that I was at home with my mom, my expenses and affordability just looked a little different. And I was able to take a job that I would not have normally been able to take. And I was able to work in a youth center in the Austin community on Chicago's west side. So that's the largest um, minority population on the west side of Chicago. It's a huge area.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to take a job there where I created a career development program for the reentry population for males ages 18 through 30. And that was where I really realized what I wanted to do, where my gift lied, where the opportunity was, and where I could be of value at.
And then I believe at some point this would lead you to currently where you're at today with CHBM Services. And could you kind of explain a little bit about what CHBM Services actually is and what it does?
Yep. So CHBM Services is my consulting firm where I'm the principal career and workforce development consultant. And we bridge the gap between solving problems for and understanding the problems of professionals in the workplace. And the real short version of that is between I leverage my IO Psych hat, my Lean Six Sigma Green Belt hat, and my love for people and helping folks grow to be able to help small organizations build their workforce development programs.
Mm-hmm.
That's the short
That's
version.
a short version. Okay. And Catherine, do you think at your life you could be that word that you hear every now and then, a role model that if you could do what you've done and other young black women can actually look at your life and saying, well, look, I came from this environment. I was able to strive through it. Do you look at that as a way of encouragement, or is there another way that you think people should look at their life who are having obstacles, sort of like what you had, and you can kind of just be there for them in whatever particular way? I don't know what's the best way to really show a good example, so maybe you could kind of explain your life and how you would recommend going about it.
My journey, the road that I had to take is why Disruptive Inc., my 501c3, what was launched. And
Mm-hmm.
it does everything that you just said,
Mm-hmm.
right? In order for us to be able to get to certain places in life, we have to be able to see them. And whether it's just in our imagination and we feel deep, deep in the pit of our stomach that yes, there's some way for this to be done, or we need to visually see that there is someone somewhere that has accomplished something along the lines of what it is that I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I will not say I didn't have a support system because I did. I didn't realize it at the time because it didn't look like what we think support is supposed to look like. But I had women specifically in my life that believed in me and that pushed me, whether they fired me from a job because I was not showing up and doing what I was supposed to do the way I was supposed to do it, and it was to teach me a lesson, or them creating opportunities and spaces for me to be a part of. I had that. And I think a large part of the gap that we see is folks feeling like they don't have that. Sorry about that. And
Mm-hmm.
they can't see it.
Right.
So I created through my organization and why I'm so transparent about my life, the opportunities for this to exist for others, whether you know me or not. I think through the conversation, you feel like you do, right? And you see, like through my radio show, through how I show up, I'm consistently showcasing other individuals that look like me, sound like me, come from areas that I come from, have overcome things similar or maybe even more egregious, and they've been successful in spite of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it gives the lens that, yes, if you put in the work, because you absolutely have to, like, I gave the 32,000-foot view of this, but there were nights that I cried. I almost had nervous breakdowns that I went without. There was a lot there were a lot of opportunities for me to take that step back and say, I'm not doing this anymore. My kids are better off with someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I'm better off not being here, or things along those, all of the thoughts that an individual could possibly think, I thought at some point in time. But the difference between thinking and those becoming a reality was me believing that I had another calling. I wasn't going through this for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely, that pride kicked in. I was not going to give folks the satisfaction of seeing me fail because that was the label. Like everybody went from being extremely proud of me to being ashamed and embarrassed. because I had a child and I got pregnant at 19.
Well, Catherine, I was just wondering where did that word disruptive Inc. came from when you gave me that title? 'Cause I thought that was a kind of unusual title to name an organization. I was just kind of figuring out, and it didn't dawn on me until you just mentioned why, the motive or the reason behind Disruptive Inc. And is Disruptive Inc. different than CHBM Services, or is it all kind of one particular organization or one agency?
So CHBM Services is my for-profit, hard stop. That's my consultancy.
Okay.
The Disruptive Inc. is my 501c3. It is the not-for-profit that I founded in 2019, and it has been through a whole lot of changes, but primarily it has been responsive um, to the needs of single parents ages 18 through 40 by way of holistic career development. And when I say holistic career and workforce development, I say that from a place of think of everything that I just explained by way of my journey. Imagine what my temperament may have been like someday showing up in the workplace, right? Imagine my productivity shifts, spikes, extremely high, extremely low, right? Because of the things in this world that was taking place in my life. In the business world, we have to own, acknowledge, and understand that if folks' basic needs are not being met, they cannot show up the way that they need to in the workforce. So, through the organization over the years, we focused on whatever the big thing was that was happening in the economy, right? So, during COVID, we were responsive in that aspect. So, we were boots on the ground handing out PPE. And at the same time, we were connecting the dots, but between where period health and having access to the resources that you need helped women to show up in the workplace, as well as we did um, career a virtual career and resource fair where we were introducing folks to restorative justice, where we were introducing people to how they can leverage placement agencies for those who are in between jobs, have not held jobs for large periods of time, the opportunity that comes along with leveraging placement agencies, to when the moratorium was there. So we were passing out food, back to school supplies, right? As well as we had credit unions come in, not traditional banks. Because in the black and brown community, our relationship with traditional banking, depending on where you are, can be a little bit iffy for a number of reasons historically. So, credit unions are a great way for you to start building that financial acumen and the relationships that you need to with money. So just doing those type of things was how we spent our first couple of years. The last few years, we have focused on a place of helping individuals to build the relationships that they need and to show up the way that they need through a framework called intentional interchanges. And that framework is something that sits underneath CHBM services. So CHBM services and Disruptive Inc. work alongside each other, but they're two very different entities. One can provide the resources for a limited cost and for free, while the other is very much my bread and butter.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned one is a nonprofit,
Yep.
501c3, and the other one is a consultant form, like your own
Yep.
personal business.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's in, actually an LLC. Yep.
LLC. Okay. So that's a good accomplishment to be able to have something that you can generate wealth and do well, and then you have another one that's kind of like almost a form of giving back to community, giving back to the community and to the society. And if it's still able to make you a profit, then so let it be in every different category. Now, currently, as we mentioned off of the air, you reside outside of Chicago, about a half an hour, 25 minutes away, and you feel kind of blessed where you're at now with your, I guess, adult children. But what's the whole vibe now as we're getting close to ending this particular segment, where your life is at this particular stage and moving forward?
So for the last 11 years, I have lived in the western suburbs, the southwestern suburbs of Illinois. I live in DuPage County,
Hmm.
which is the wealthiest county in the state of Illinois by way of resources and the whole gambit. Um, For me, the decision to transition from Chicago to the western suburbs was twofold. One, I was working out here.
Mm-hmm.
So I was commuting from like the Hyde Park area to like the Oak Brook area because that's where I worked. And then my job transitioned to Woodridge too. So there was, and then my oldest daughter was graduating.
Mm-hmm.
So my girls went to charter school. They finished. Well, my oldest finished at a charter school on the southwest side, and there was yet again a whole lot happening. I didn't want her to go to high school in Chicago public schools for a number of reasons. She was either going to go to a Catholic school or she was going to attend one of the selective enrollment schools. She didn't manage to get in one of the selective enrollment schools, so Catholic schools it was. So it just the way that the timing aligned, it worked out that it was an opportunity for me to be closer to work. It was an opportunity for her to be closer to school and be in a better environment. And it's just literally all history from there. There are no regrets. Now everything that my organization does is inside of the Chicago city limits, but I've moved outside of them because it was what was best for my children and me at the time.
Mm-hmm. And right now, you're at the stage in life where you really want to be at this particular point.
I'm in a good place
You
because
know.
on top of my organizations, I work a full time job too. So when
Mm-hmm.
I started this with I wear many hats, I do, um,
Right.
and I work in the career and workforce development space for one of the largest utilities in the world. So it's all full circle. Everything that I do across the gambit overlaps and I only live 14 miles away from my job. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a part of that maturity thing, right? You learn the lessons from when you're a kid, and you realize how important it is to be stable, how important it is to love what you do, how important it is to be a value add, how important it is to give back, how important it is to create a community for your children, for you to have access to resources, for you to be able to provide wholeheartedly in a 360-degree gambit, right? And where I am in my life, yes, my oldest two girls are able to stay with me while they're in their early 20s and they're figuring out. So they don't have to be stressed out about trying to live in this climate, in this environment. And they don't have to make the decisions that I had to make as a parent when I was their age. So that to me is success on a whole nother level. And then I have a 9 year old, and my 9 year old doesn't know anything else but the area that we live in. We've lived in this same area for the entirety of his life. And the plan is that he goes through middle school and high school out here as well.
Catherine, that sounds like an excellent way to end this particular segment. I couldn't think of a better way. And you was able to cover a lot of things about your life during this particular segment that really came across very strong and solid and open as well. And as I ask every guest every single week towards the end of the show, if there's anything else that they would like for people to know about to know about their self or what they're currently doing or planning to do, feel free to express yourself.
Oh, absolutely. So make sure that you connect with me on social media. I'm on all platforms. Hashtag Ask Catherine. So that's A for author, S for speaker, C for coach, and then my name, Catherine. And you can connect with me via my link tree, which is linktree backslash CHBM Services. And that opens you up to literally everything that I am doing at all times. It tells you about the radio show, the why behind that, the books, the activities, the events, free resources for career development, all of the things. So just feel free to connect. I am an open book and no question is a dumb one because, again, I'm here as inspiration to help someone that is watching this, that is listening to this, see and understand. And I'm surrounded by a whole lot of people that are just like me and are doing great things too. So we're here to help. It's our give back.
Thank you, Catherine. That's an excellent presentation. I really appreciate you giving up your time this morning to be a special guest on the All About You talk show. And I wish you the very best of luck with your near future plans and definitely keep up the good work at what you're doing at this particular stage.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Catherine. Okay. All right, this is Jonathan Small. Just enjoyed hosting this edition of the All About You talk show with a very special guest, Catherine McNeil. She is, I guess, the founder and executive director of Disruptive Link. Also, she is the principal consultant of CHBM Services, LLC, I believe in the greater Chicago metropolitan area or somewhere in that particular region of the country. And it was a real interesting, open conversation that I enjoyed having with Catherine McNeil this morning on the All About You talk show. Hope for you, the viewers, you thought as well, likewise. Working on putting together another show for next week. And until I see you again, for the viewers out there, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.